Would like to welcome everyone. Wendell, can we get the test 1, 2, 3? Sounds a little better. I'd like to welcome everyone to our special call City of Little Rock Board of Directors meeting for October the 13th. Also welcome those that are watching and viewing online. Madam Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Director Richardson.
Here.
Director Webb. Here. Director Pack. Here. Director Wright. Director Wyrick. Here. Director Compuris. Here. Director Compuris. Okay. It just didn't sound right.
I meant to say he was here.
Director Phillips.
Here.
Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hines.
Present.
Mayor Scott.
Present. Director Peck, if you would do our invocation, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Y'all will look inward for a moment. Thank you for coming together today for this very important task of choosing a director to replace the irreplaceable Irma Hendricks. Please watch over us and guide us as we make this very important city decision, not just for Ward 1, but for all of Little Rock. Amen.
Amen. May y'all please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty. Mr. Moore, before I recognize a motion to go into executive session, if you would, as we all know, there's been some confusion as it relates to legal settlements. Could you please share with the board your process that you've consistently done?
Mayor, members of the board, obviously I've been out of the city, but have been reading about the various issues surrounding a settlement case. I'm a little bit, since this is a still pending legal matter, I really would like to just talk about the process. And the process is fairly simple that we've used throughout my tenure. Usually work very closely with the city attorney's office, not usually, I'll work very closely with the city attorney's office. Some cases we are able to settle through a mediator or a third party. Some we end up not and having to go to the court. But we work very closely with the city attorney's office. If we get to an agreement, then it's been the city attorney's history, and I don't want to speak for him, but then he sort of at least lets the board know what direction we're going, and if there's any objection, then we go back to the back to the table. This is a very unique one because the city attorney early on, because of some other lawsuits that have been filed, asked that we enter into an agreement with the Arkansas Municipal League so that the league, through another set of attorneys, would represent the city. So that's sort of the process we have utilized, at least during my tenure.
Speaking to the $50,000 limit.
We've always operated under the city manager had authority to exceed $50,000, or not to exceed $50,000. So that's, and a lot of times the cases are settled for a whole lot less, whether it's $33,000 or $10,000. So during my tenure, that's how we've operated. And I think it's important to note that this is a very unique situation. I basically have been sort of being guided by 2 or 3 sets of legal experts. As you all know, I've worked with Tom, with the city attorney, for over 20 years and have the utmost respect for him. We had engaged a third party through the league to assist us with this particular case.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that we had all the facts on what's going on in this process. I know it's been in the newspaper the last couple of days, but wanted to make sure, I knew you had been out of town, and make sure that you were able to share that. Mr. Moore and I will confer on next steps in regards to anything else that needs to be shared from that standpoint. Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Is there a motion? Sorry, Vice Mayor Hines, do you have a question?
Yeah, since they were brought up in the facts of this case, so this board was not consulted on any of this settlement. Our first hearing of it was when the notification went to the city attorney through the district court's office. And I object to any of this settlement, and especially after our city attorney got a hold of it, to see some of the extra financial ramifications that were put on it. And I object to it, and I wanted to be on the record. And I appreciate you did it. So the facts are, this board was never consulted on this settlement.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor Hines. Mr. Moore, has the members of the board ever voted on one of your legal settlements?
I defer to Tom on that question, but I don't believe there's been an official vote to settle a particular lawsuit.
So there's never been a public vote, or ordinance, or a resolution before the board to object or to say yes to?
Again, I believe I described the process earlier that we've utilized, and again, this is a unique situation because we do have a city attorney. However, in this case, we engaged 2 other outside entities to help guide. So to answer your question, the board has never officially voted on a particular settlement.
Thank you so much.
Mayor,
Director Wright. Then after Director Wright, I believe we have Director Adcock.
Mayor, in the past, in my tenure, when there's a settlement reached, the city attorney reaches out to us to at least make us aware of it before we start receiving things from other people that we are not familiar with. He is the city attorney, not whoever these municipal league people are, he is. And so any communication or any advice that, in my opinion, this board receives needs to come from him. So even though we have not voted on settlements that were under 50,000, we have been made aware of them, and we were not made aware of this. And I believe that may be some of the objection.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Mr. Moore, can you restate the reason why the city attorney was not involved?
Not honestly.
That's not what I'm saying. I understand why.
I'm asking Mr. Moore a question.
Mayor, I really think Tom ought to address that.
There was evidently a decision not to let us know any more about it. The case started out with us handling it. During the course of preparation, we recognized the nature of the cross-examination we would have to do and the potential damage to the department in order to be successful in this lawsuit. As the board knows, there was disagreement at the police department as to initially what should be done. And then there were statements written, one of which was a defense about the officer's actions, assuming certain things when the officer didn't remember the actions. So that's when we said, yes, let's get the league there so an outside attorney can go through with the trial. In the law, for those who practice and understand the rules of ethics, there are two types of conflicts. There is a irreversible conflict, in which case an attorney, or to the extent his office is involved, his office cannot be involved in the case. For example, if the city was to wish to expand the road in front of my house or in front of my chief deputy's house, and there was a debate as to what the valuation was, obviously our office could not handle the condemnation action for the city and also serve ourselves as the plaintiffs in the case. That's an irreversible conflict. There is one that is not irreversible, which is this situation. Now, in all honesty, at the end of last year, we got notice that there was going to be a mediation to settle this case. We had not been given any notice of that prior to that time. I brought the issue up. We had discussions with the league and with personnel in the city, and they ended up not doing the mediation because the amount being requested went up substantially. But it was agreed that while a lawyer not part of my office would receive information, the information would be shared with my office, and we would move forward from there. One of the people who signed your letter even made statements, and I'm putting together the notes for you now, that when we got to the point of potential settlement, we would do what I have always done, particularly since Harris versus City of Fort Smith, which is an FOI case, which says I can't poll you. I can't effectively hold a meeting. And so I would call and say, we've got a settlement. This is what the case is about. This is what we're going to do unless we hear otherwise. And only if everyone said nothing did we go ahead and settle the case, and it was authorized for the appropriate person to sign the settlement and set the check.
Thank
That
you.
didn't happen in this case. Later on, just about a month ago or 2 months ago, I don't really know the exact date, one of the directors let me know that Robert Newcomb, the attorney for Mr. Starks, had commented to her that he had settled the case, his client was not to pay any damages, and the city was going to pay $500,000. That bothered me. The issue was brought up again, and I was assured that I would be kept in the loop. And that was not done. Now, I don't know exactly when this settlement occurred, but I do know that I was being sent depositions in July of this year to read, and I kept getting the same answer from the league lawyers. What did the city do that was unconstitutional? And the answer was nothing. And so I figured they'd file their motion for summary judgment, we'd see what happened, and then we'd look at the issue again. And then last Thursday, I learned for the first time the matter had been settled. No one had talked to me. It is not true that you haven't been contacted about settlements that are under the amount given to the city manager to settle a case. We had a situation, you'll remember, with the Little Rock Police Department, where a recruit objected to a Facebook post that used an offensive term. That recruit was fired, the recruit with the offensive term was fired, and a third recruit was fired. 3 different lawsuits were filed. One of them, all of them were essentially $25,000 to settle. You were told that. So it was the same process we've used before. In this particular case, particularly since I don't know of any case in the last 30 plus years where there has been a death caused by an officer in deadly force, has the board been left out of the discussion. And then finally, for what it's worth, the one case I can remember right off the top of my head was Jimerson Creek. The board did take a vote on whether to take further action on that case, and that was done. But that was before Bruce was the city manager. And I guess that's basically the response.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carpenter. Director Adcock?
Yes. In my 29 years, I think that probably every case has come from Mr. Carpenter calling us, asking us, telling us the facts of it, telling us that Mr. Moore and him had come up with this plan, and did I have any objections? When I knew that Mr. Moore and Mr. Carpenter had come up with the plan, and some of it was under the amount of 500,000 or whatever. So, but I always was told that I could object if I wanted to, but knowing that they had come to conclusions of this, I had no objection to it. But I think every case I knew that ever came before us, Mr. Carpenter had called us on.
Thank you so much, Director Adcock. Director Warwick?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question, and it's in regard to the amount of money that the city manager can authorize. When Tom called me on Thursday night, I think it was, or Friday night when he called, he was saying that it was not appropriate for Bruce to authorize 50,000 because it was not a bid or an RFP. So I mean, that's what I heard. So I'd like clarification on, in this particular matter, if the 50,000 was appropriate.
Mr. Moore?
Dr. Rugg, I've always operated under the assumption that I had $50,000, or the position has spending authority up to $50,000. Last week was the first time that I saw in writing that it only dealt with competitive bids. So I was not aware of that because, again, just 2 years ago, there was 5 African-American officers that sued the city. We settled that case, and it was for $33,000 from the city. Again, Mr. Carpenter can explain his comments, but I've always operated under that mandate that I had spending capacity up to $50,000.
Yeah, and that's what I had always thought was the practice. But with the city attorney saying that that is not correct, how are we going to operate in the future? Is he still going to have the spending authority on anything that's including RFPs and bids, or is it going to be just for the RFPs and bids?
Well, I can share from this administration standpoint. Mr. Moore, how long have you been city manager?
Long time.
I believe I graduated high school in 2001. When did you become city manager?
Wow. I graduated. I was named city manager December 17th of 2002.
But you understand my question. I just want to know what the process is going to be going in the future. Did we uncover a law that we should have been following, or are we just going to continue status quo?
Well,
That's my real question.
the question, at least the answer from this administration, this city, since 2002, at least that's the most recent memory, and I'm pretty sure Mr. Moore would say his predecessor did the same, has always operated that the Office of Executive Administration through the city manager has $50,000 spending authority. We will continue that unless told otherwise from a legal standpoint. I do want to share with the members of the board that we will have the Arkansas Municipal League. I think it's fair and just that we keep this very transparent and have a public meeting, because what happens is when things are done privately, it creates confusion because I've received phone calls that when you all are receiving phone calls about things, that could be a violation of FOIA as it relates to the Fort Smith case. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say that's true or not, but I've received phone calls today that when phone calls have been made to you privately, that is against FOIA. I don't know if that's true or not, but those are things that have come to my attention. But we do know since 2002 and probably prior to that, at least the history of the city, that the city manager has always had spending authority $50,000 or less. And so at this point in time, we will continue to move in that fashion. But the Arkansas Municipal League will be here because due to a request of the city attorney, as he shared, he also filed on, I think, August of 2020, a conflict, and as he shared, it's two types of conflicts. And that's the reason why we had other attorneys. Otherwise, we would have loved to have had our own city attorney on this process.
So we're not going to seek any further guidance on that particular
Yes,
rule, or are we just going to continue operating the way that we operated?
Mr. Moore and I will confer on that matter and bring that back before the board, because I do think that needs to be cleared up. I totally agree.
That's why I brought it up.
Yes, ma'am. It will be,
With anybody, but we just need to understand what the,
sure.
'cause I assumed he could sign anything.
We did too.
He's been really good about, I mean, sometimes he doesn't do that. You know, if he sees it's a controversial thing or something the board wants to know about, then he'll bring something to us for us to approve.
Yeah. Mr. Moore and I were both caught off guard. Yeah. But, so again, we'll have the Arkansas Municipal League before the members of the board next Tuesday, and they'll provide an update on the legal settlement.
Understand, I'm not trying to raise an issue. I'd just like clarification for the future.
I think it's sorely needed, and I thank you for that question. This is all in the name of transparency. But that being stated, is there, Director Pierce, you had a question?
Well, as always, I learn something new every day from what Tom said. You know, Bruce and Tom are both right. They have made settlements, but Joan is right in that Tom doesn't ask us our opinion, but he does give us the fact. And it has always been our understanding as a body that if one of us objects, then it had to come to the board and be discussed in in public. And so I really don't, in all honesty, care about the $50,000 limit. The question is, are we in charge? And if we're not in charge, we might as well go on home. So the issue to me is, from what Tom just said, as of this summer, Tom, is it right that you were in part of the discussions after we had another law firm? So to me, he was part of the entity moving forward. If you were getting briefs and you're in the discussion and you hear about an arbitration and you're talking about it, then there's a breakdown of what's going on. We have two employees. I trust both of them explicitly. But I do feel bad when the press calls and says, what do you think about the settlement? And I'm going, what settlement? I didn't know there was an arbitration going on. I didn't know there was a settlement discussion going on. The municipal league, if they're talking to Tom and giving him information, as far as I'm concerned, however you want to say he's recused or not, he's involved. And he is our conduit to what's going on. And that conduit was broken. So I don't know how this gets resolved, or if the settlement really is in place, if this board says it isn't, or if the board says that it has to be discussed. I don't know those legal questions. Antoine may know it.
And Director Computers, all those questions will be answered by the Arkansas Municipal League Tuesday.
But so am I to assume that between now and Tuesday, everything's held in abeyance, and this board still has a decision-making part of this going forward?
Well, this is the perspective of the Office of Executive Administration, which is the mayor and the city manager. One should know, we're currently proceeding in pattern and practice since 2002. That's number one. I can't speak to our city attorney calling and checking to see whether or not you object. I'm not on those phone calls. And so, but I don't suspect anything will be done between now and Tuesday, if that's the question.
Well,
But the Arkansas Municipal League will be here Tuesday to answer all of your questions.
And Mr. Wilkinson will be here. We can talk to him.
Yes, sir.
But let me make sure that we all understand this so it doesn't get put. Tom and my whole time, and I'm the third longest tenured person now. I am the oldest.
Excuse me, I object, you're not the oldest.
But never has Tom called me and said, what do you think? He said, here are the facts. And that is it. He has never once in the whole time I've been on here ever asked me to say yes or no. It is, here are the facts. This is what Bruce and I've come up with, and I'm just telling you the facts. And it was my obligation, if I didn't like it, to raise my hand in public and say, I've been advised of this and we have to discuss it in public. And that is my understanding. So I don't want anybody to think that Tom is out there soliciting my vote on any issue.
Thank you so much. And all your legal questions will be answered by the Arkansas Municipal League. And again, we shared that the city attorney was conflicted out. Mr. Director Phillips?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll reserve my legal comments to next week since we're going to have the discussion then. I just want to respond to Director Wyrick's point. I think us as a policymaking board, we can make that decision on whether the spending limit of $50,000 is just for purchasing or if it's for something else. So I think it's on us to decide whether do we want our employee to have that type of authority or not. And maybe after we have this conversation next week, we go into that discussion. But I think we are going to make that determination to make it clear on whether Mr. Moore has the authority for $50,000 for everything, or is it narrow, and what that means. So I just want to share that. I agree with you, Director Wyrick. We need some clarity. But I think it's incumbent on us to provide that clarity to the city manager and to the city.
Yeah, I'm kind of rules-based, and so I like to know
We are too.
what the rules are, and so we can move forward, because that issue has been brought to my attention, and I just want to make sure we get that.
It'll be clarified next week when we have the Arkansas Municipal League. That being, Director Richardson?
Yes, Mayor, I move that we go into executive session for the selection of our new colleagues, our new Ward 1 director.
There's a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We'll ask for everyone to please exit the room